So resistance. I was watching a video by Teal Swan, and for those who know Teal Swan, I think a lot of people know Teal Swan. It got me thinking about my own resistance, and I know that there's some sort of vibe sometimes that maybe like I tell myself that even if when I do this, it's like, am I being like a show off about it? Or, I don't know. But all I know is, so I'm blowing my nose because I just got out of the cold shower. And I love cold showers because I feel very grounded. I actually sense many things, which I'm going to talk about actually later in this video. The thing about resistance, the way she was talking about it was like, oh, okay, well, it's shadow work. But the thing is, it's not about the method or anything like that. So what I did was this time, I usually talk kind of more, spur of the moment, kind of like I don't know what to call it. What's the saying? Something whim? Out of whim, whatever. I don't speak English now. So, what am I resisting? How am I resisting is the question that came up actually for me. So, the notes I took in here were examples of what I can think of is that I wrote this a few hours ago. Let's see if I can remember this. Whether or not it can be or is perceived as egoic. So any examples? Okay, because that's what is done is done. So like on a linear time perspective sort of thing. So for example, creating metal, right? Forging a rock. Forging a rock, yeah, you forge a rock, it turns into metal, you heat it up, it turns into metal. Which itself can be an analogy for resistance, and yet at the same time, when there isn't any resistance. So I don't know if that makes sense to you, but the way it is, think about it like, the way I see it is like, it's how I felt for myself what resistance is like, it's not about the thing that we're resisting or any of the methods that we use to. It's not about the outcome. It's about how we perceive things. So perception and also perception, attention, and awareness. So where we bring our attention to, that's where we kind of bring awareness to what we're perceiving. In other words, if we perceive something to be bad, then most likely we're going to see it as bad. If we perceive something to be good, then most likely we're going to see it as good, right? So this polarity, this duality thing, it's a perception, but underneath all that is the awareness of that perception. So I came to realize several things. I'm actually going to read it here. So with every action, right, as you know, there is a reaction. So the way I've seen that is that it's in simple things that we do, that I do, or at least I do on a daily basis. So for example, if I were to open a bag, right, I put a bag in, and I place it here, where it could be possible, it could get in the way. If I place it here, it could probably not get in the way. So it gets in, whatever gets in the way of like flow, because for me, I've been aware of like what I like flow, okay? But if I don't put it there, if I put it where it's gonna just, gonna be an obstruction to my flow, then I've already abandoned that desire anyways to be in flow. Meaning like even just walking the path that I take, why would I put something that gets in the way? What I know it's, so it's part of that is that kind of that awareness thing. It's like learning from that. Because if you repeat the same thing over and over and over and over again, not learning from it and just getting angry and saying, the shoes are in the way, this isn't the way, this isn't the way, this isn't. It's all about being clear with exactly, that's where the awareness, it can be found, but it's a process of, do we make a choice to make a change with what we're, instead of blaming the situation, blaming other people, blaming even our thoughts, blaming our beliefs, blaming this, blah, 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 blah. It's about making those changes. And that's what I've learned for myself. So here's another example. So for example, let's say I don't have a space, right? Let's say I have like this room itself, not enough space, right? Typically, but, I usually might get annoyed a little bit, be like, I hit something, but I realize that it's like, well, this is the space I'm in. This is how much I can move. So what do? Either two things. Accept, okay, so I accept it, that there's this limiting space, or I make space that I can foresee as far as possible into the future or near future, where I will at least feel and experience that. In other words, I'm choosing to make those adjustments. I also realize though that whenever I forget what I had the desire to say, I'm actually reading this now, I would sense that tension in my body, in this body. Back then I would just get pissed, right? And I still kind of do sometimes. I sit there until I remembered what I was actually correctly wanting to say, or do, or remember, or think, or whatever. So in other words, this is the funny thing about me writing something down and thoughts come through and I write it down. Next thing I know, I don't remember the feeling and the intention behind it. This is the tricky thing. I have this thing. So bear with me. Okay? So we're gonna keep moving on. I'm not gonna, that's another thing right there. So if I start to feel like I'm annoyed about, I forgot what that thing was, or what is that thing? How come I don't remember it? I just don't remember it. Now, what do we do about that instead? Right? I'm going to tie this back into what I actually love to do myself on the side. Every once in a while, is acquire languages. That's part of this thing, where it's not. I'm not going to talk about the whole language acquisition thing. I'm talking about the fact that when I've learned and I've become aware of this little thing that's a part of, or an aspect of communication, which is instead of just studying it and learning it, all that stuff, I actually did something about it, because I was like, well, instead of blaming the system, blaming all that blah, 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 and calling it bad, I did something. I said, well, okay, then that doesn't work for me. Like another example, for example, is like, sometimes I would get interested in a language that's so foreign, that's so underdog. I love underdog languages, but when there's no resource for it, and it forces me to study it, and I know that I have two choices. I either suck it up and just do the whole old traditional way of like studying and regurgitating and forcing and overusing this part of the brain, what's called the short-term memory, or I could see if there is another option and see, okay, are there stories or cartoons where I could just acquire it naturally, etc., etc., etc. But when those two things don't work, what do? I let it go. Because there's no point in, and this is really not about having a point. It's more like, well, if that causes stress, if it goes against, a sense of oneness, not just it's more than just peace, then I'm just like, okay, well then I just let it go. Because it's not worth it. It's not worth the time, it's not a waste of time. There are no resources for it, and it's just, or at least I'm not inspired to if I don't resonate with how I'm potentially acquiring it. It means to me it's already a sign. And again, it's just more than signs. It's like there's this connection, and it's invisible, but it's a connection to remind me, don't force it. Listen to that. So for me, I want to listen to that. I have to listen to it. I get to listen to it. It's all about making those choices. Again, choices. I wrote down here, so this is why one thing at a time actually works. So when it's one thing at a time, it means that sometimes I will cook something and I have this thing on. It's actually, it's like a wireless Bluetooth. But if I have it on while cooking, I'm actually distracting myself. I made that decision, consciously or unconsciously, it doesn't matter. I made that decision. Nobody else made it for me. That if this is hearing something, but then you see what I mean? It's a simple thing. It's like, I'm not doing one thing at a time. But at the same time, it's also not only literal, but it also, I wrote down, it brings awareness into every moment, even if the process of building that said awareness is incremental. So in other words, just because it's one thing at a time, this perception that it's like slow it's a perception of time. It's, as Eckhart puts it, this conceptualization of time. That because we're so attached to the body, especially it's the ego that's attached to the body, or an unhealthy ego that's attached to the body, it's seeing time as if that's the reality of it, like it's linear time, right? As if it's like, time does exist, but it's more like, it's almost like it's so attached to it that it's like a Siamese twin. Form and time are like these Siamese twins going, they can't be separated. And so there's the ego, that's the ego attaching itself to, as if it quantifies time as if it's like here. Time is not linear, time is not forward, time is not backwards, time is time, period. So how this goes into this one is that when we do things, when we're focused, it's not really focus, it's really the intention, right? I said earlier. It's also what I call the true meaning of what you say is go with the flow, right? Except that for me, I used to think that meant relying on or reverting back to unconscious beliefs or behaviors that meant me just doing nothing. Right? So for me, I think the key has always been like just pausing. Not to go in that flow of resistance. A little oxymoronic there, but the flow of resistance. Right? It's the critic. You're sensing it through the body, the attention, that it's like, okay, and then you let it go. If it's starting to be kind of like a over-the-top pushing, rather than just pausing and seeing what else comes, see, there's a difference between guidance and pushing. So there's that guidance that comes through. You can call it guidance, whatever you want, but either way, it's a connection. It's the flow, the natural flow that is invisible, rather than the egoic pursuit for I'm gonna fucking stuff the fuck out of this brain and I'm gonna kill it till it's dead. No, that never works, right? Never works. I mean, for me at least, I don't want that anymore. So when I start to remember things, then I go back to that path of where I was, where I stopped, for example. Because I allowed myself to get distracted and move into the next thing without finishing what I was actually doing before. That's when I can flow again. So basically, yes, the best thing is really, at least in my case, is one thing at a time. So, one thing I also realized here's another point is that sometimes I want to get rid of or resolve any of the resistance just for the sake of not having resistance, which ties into exactly what Teal Swan was saying in her video. She said, I forgot what she said, but in itself, it can be and can lead to a form of resistance. So for example, when I practice presence, because I want to not be not present or unconscious, but at the core truth, what I'm actually feeling is that I'm resisting the moment of allowing it to happen. So instead, I'm looking at, or I'm focused on the outcome. Okay? So not wanting to not be present. Not wanting to be not present. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Okay. So when I rely on practice, another one is here, when I rely on practice, or when I believe that the tool, the method, technique, etc., okay, all those things, is the salvation to my awareness or awakening, then I've already away from the journey. And the journey itself is not even the key, actually. Again, it's about where we place our attention. So typically, either in time or outside of time, that is, when it's in time, you'll feel tension. And this is what Eckhart talks about when he says, like, when something about whatever the concepts are, when I say in time, I mean like you're locked into that delusion of like here, 0, 100, beginning, end, okay? If it's outside, which is actually not, when I say outside here, it's not an opposition to inside time. You just feel the flow. Even if it's just a bit at first, you'll start to feel kind of more relaxed, less tension, and it's really, I don't know, really. So going back to the whole thing I said earlier about why I wanted to bring in the Wim Hof method, it's not a method to me, it's just because it works. The one thing about it is that the cold, and I'm going to repeat this, I kind of said this earlier already, is that it's actually helped and taught me to actually start learning how to sense through the physical, whenever there's tension or resistance, literally. So for example, if I'm getting, again, annoyed or pissed or something like that, even just a tad bit annoyed or whatever, or irked by my own resistance to whatever it is, I sense it, because it's like the cold, it's almost like, because tension comes from a harder, it's like a tighter feel, it feels warmer. I don't know if you feel that, but it feels like it's constricted. So what it does is it locks in, like temperature almost. It's almost like it's going like this, and it's like it's almost like if you cook something, and you don't let it cool, and you just close it, and you don't let the heat out, it's gonna stay inside. It's kind of like that. But with the cold, it's almost like when that happens, it's almost like, oh, I can feel it. I can feel the tension. So, again, it's, placing where our attention is, or rather, where we place our attention, or rather, attention itself. So I kind of want to tie this to how, like when I talk, like when I was taking notes and these things just come through. For those who don't know much about Makemake, this is part of that. I believe that Makemake is this sort of creative, intelligent downloads. Philip Sedgwick said that it's something to do with creative intelligence, which is basically similar to when you get downloads, you get inspiration, all those things. Mine's is square Mercury, Uranus. So I have this sort of like crazy thing that's going on. Like my Makemake is actually, it's in already my second house, or at least it's in the cusp of my second house, so it affects my second house more than my first house. I'm not here for full astrology. I'm just like saying, using it astrologically speaking. If you're ever curious, look up Makemake in your chart. Where is it? Is it retrograde? What house it's in? What sign? Is there any aspect is there any aspect to other planets? And it's going to get that feeling of like, either it's going to be a tension of like, I'm not understanding what this means, but I get this feeling that there is something that I'm supposed to say, or it's like it's like this feeling of you just know. That's Makemake. When you just know, you know. But either there's an insecurity about it, there's a block, or it's fully released, and it's just, people who do this are people who have good, like, if you look at people's charts, and they have, without even getting to know them, right? Because this is the process, right? Sometimes when, as astrologers, it's almost like you get to know the person before even getting to know them, which is interesting. But that doesn't even do anything. It's just, you're just getting the facts about that person. It doesn't necessarily mean you know them. When I say know, as in like on a very chemical, energetic level, that's totally different. The getting to know through astrology chart is more about, it's kind of like you're the observer, and this is what you see, and this is what you give, and that's it. Right? It's the energy that comes from that person who understands, oh yeah, that is my experience, or that's not my experience, right? So, with this placement I have for myself, I noticed that as I go through life, it's sort of like, it's almost like Uranus. I guess maybe because it is square Uranus and Mercury. So, anyways, I wrote here that the presence is simply allowing for the energy to take place. Easier said than done. We can say, oh, obviously, but maybe not obviously. So whenever I have these random downloads, thoughts, for example, etc., that come through while I'm doing something, I let the stream of thought flow. If I don't express it or write it down, or share it, or start it, I don't know, someone else will. So this is the thing about, sometimes it happens when I'm like, let's say I'm doing my cold shower, I'm outside, I'm going on a walk, or whatever, or something, and I'm talking to somebody, and just something comes through, and then I'm just like, more inspiration, but I'm not able to record it or share it. It's okay, because I wrote down here, the presence act itself, that beingness, really what it is beingness itself, to me, now means that it's tied to divine timing. So you know that saying, all in good time, right? It's like that flow of abundance that's always there. So energy is neither created nor destroyed. Right? Hello, we've heard it so many times, and so that means it's going to go somewhere else. It's going to go somewhere else, another time, another place. But of course, I wanted to emphasize here that when I say another place, it doesn't necessarily mean. And this is going to sound, of course, esoteric and all those things, and we know all this stuff. But if you don't know, I'm sorry. The place in this case means that it could be in a different. I don't know how to explain it. I just now understand it more. It's place, not necessarily an entity of place, like an energy. Because it's all energy, it's gonna go somewhere. somewhere, or somebody else, or some other time. Someone else. Okay, if that makes sense. It could be also in my dreams. It might pop up in my dreams. So, or in your dreams, or in their dreams, or whoever. Either way, it's going to be passed on. So I'm not, this is one of those things about being present. It's one of those things that tie me to what I'm resisting is all about. That if I'm resisting the whole like, oh, I'm not going to write that down, oh, I'm just distracted, why are you talking to me, blah, blah, blah. Even if it's just a little bit of annoyance, you know, it's good to pause. Okay? At least for me, that's what I do. One thing that also came to me earlier today was like the whole concept of easy. And take it from me, Libras, in general, we like easy, we like comfortable, we like instead of illusions. But is it actually flow? In my experience, it's not. Okay? Because even though it creates this harmony, it's egoic harmony. I call it egoic harmony. Like in my chart, I have this, my sun trine moon. So there's this flow of like, I know what I want, I know how to regenerate. Actually, Pluto is trying that there too, with moon. So, trine is probably, astrologically speaking, trine is, if you see an aspect of trine between planets, that aspect is going to feel harmonious or comfortable. But the thing about comfort, and I think Rich Locke, the other tarot reader, he said that it was a reminder, it was wonderful because it was like, oh, yeah, if you're too comfortable, and then comfort isn't a bad thing. It's not about bad or good. I'm just saying, if you're too comfortable, it actually teaches laziness or unconscious behavior, basically. I know that kind of doesn't make sense for some people, but think about it. When you get comfortable, okay, you're comfortable, what happens? It becomes a sort of like, oh, I'm always getting food, I have nothing to do, so I'm very comfortable, I have things that I want, and then you get used to it. It's like a numbing effect, basically. It's desensitization. And apathy, related to that, apathy, desensitization, probably bordering further, the extreme version of that would be like, I don't know, maybe tied to narcissism. I feel like there's a tie to narcissism, which is like, because you always get what you want, or just like hubris and some pride, or whatever it is, because you always get what you want, it's easy, and then when something, the opposite comes through, right? And that's the thing about oppositions, and that's the thing about having duality, right? Duality is actually a gift in this form, because it's how else are we going to work? And I'm going to repeat this again. Matthias de Stefano said that one thing that the universe does to create fun is to create limits. And the reason why I believe that the way I understand it is that when we have limits, and it's fun because we're learning from it. Does that make sense? Like if, for example, if any sort of roadblock, look at it from like a metaphorical, analogical perspective, at the very least. So when you're walking the path, right, and all of a sudden you see this roadblock, you're so used to it. You've been walking for meters, thousands of meters for Americans, miles. Okay, you've been walking for miles. You've been walking for a long time, and then all of a sudden this roadblock, and you're just like, what the fuck? What's this? Because you got so used to that. Astrologically speaking, by the way, that's the 6th house. So it's like this hard work stuff you just keep doing. It's monotone. It's mundane. It's like okay? It actually creates apathy. It creates this sort of like, right? If you experience something for the first time, like pain, but you keep doing it and you keep doing it, all of a sudden you get desensitized to that pain. And then what happens? This is why some people apparently it depends. It depends on what it does. I'm kind of digressing a little bit, but the point is, I think you get the point a little bit with the whole something that repeats itself. And this is why it says it's insanity, right? Because there's no change. So they have to work together, right? You need the unconscious behaviors to have unconscious behaviors. Otherwise, how are you going to know what conscious is? Same thing, it's the same exact thing when you have, how do you know what black is if you don't know what black, if you have to know what black is if you don't have white? How do you know what white is if you don't have black? But in this case, of course, is the idea of it is really about learning. And when I say learning, I mean, this is the real consciousness thing where the universe becomes conscious of itself. Eckhart says this a lot. The universe is becoming conscious of itself through these lessons. Because we just call it a lesson, we call it these things. But however we understand it, the point is that same energy of understanding that, or we do, that we eventually get to understand that if we make a mistake, that's okay. At first it feels like this is not okay. But if you look back, especially for older people, you look back at the things that you had before, and you're like, I wish I hadn't done that. What would, if you process it, what would happen if that didn't happen? Like, for example, I trained so hard for 4 years. About 4 years, in fact. Training myself, 2013 up to 2020. Okay, so 17 years, never mind. Trained so hard. First, I wasn't in the swim team. It was swimming. Okay, I took it very seriously. The first few months, I was like, oh, I actually like this. I think I'm going to be good at this, or something like that. It's starting to get to me. The ego started going, okay, now I want to work. I started to take it seriously because I didn't really realize it. Because now looking back into it, it's like I was in resistance to, that I can just enjoy it. I was like, it's not enough to just have fun. It's not enough to just be in the water. It's not enough because deep down, I was trying to prove something to anyone. I thought I was trying to prove it to others that if I work on this, I will be loved and accepted. Because nobody talks about the fact that I have a teaching degree. Nobody cares that it's like I finished 9 years of university and now I'm a teacher. Blah 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 blah. All that victimization stuff. Okay, so and but again. Having to have gone through all these and actually not only practicing awareness or just literally being in those moments, whether the tool is meditation, whether the tool is yoga, Wim Hof method, all those things. Personally, I think the more intense it is, the faster you get to that awareness. And it's not to say, of course, that you'll never have these challenges. That's not the point. Because otherwise, if you're finished, then what's the point? You're done? Okay, that's it. Bye-bye. Why? It doesn't make sense. Like, this is the whole part of evolution. Now it's starting to make sense even more. Why we have, past lives, we have reincarnation, is that, and why we also, I feel, I could be wrong, I don't care, and it shouldn't matter, that when we reincarnate, we don't remember that exact person. In other words, that's not who us. We just remember the memory of that energy. And now we have this new thing. But the thing behind it is the actual consciousness itself of the universe becoming conscious. It's that streamline of like, okay, so this is where they're going, but this is not it's not an identity. It's like, how do I explain this? It's like, It's not in material form. It's not in form it cannot be understood materially speaking, physically speaking. The moment we surrender to it, or rather the word surrender I recently realized is like surrender is like I feel there's a sort of a position to it. But it can be also surrender, but accept it. The more we be giving forgiving of it, giving, the more we accept it unconditionally and just really surrender. The more we actually start to realize that, that's making sense a lot more. You just can't put it in words. And the ego wants to kind of sometimes put it in words. But I think in time, the words will come out. But the point is not the words, right? Because if you think about words, what are words? Right? I mean, for me, just like the way I love languages is like I enjoy the sounds, the different sounds, right? I think there's something that I've always loved about how languages sound, because it's like you're enjoying the tool that represents communication. Language is a tool that represents communication. It's an extension of communication. But at the root of communication, we don't need words. In truth, we don't need words because words are so limiting. Everyone knows this. Every single person, at the very least, everyone comes to be aware of it. Aware, not awareness, but like, you come, okay, I don't know what to say, Well, because you can. You can only generalize through words. Even if you have like a million words in like a language, a lexicon of a language, it's still not going to be enough. Trust, it doesn't, because the universe is always expanding. Language is not the key when it comes to languages. It's the communication behind it. In other words, I like to call it, if we're going to use words for it, is transmission. This is so Mercury, by the way. Actually, this is Mercury, Uranus, and Maki. They're all about transmission. Venus is also transmission. But the point is from here to here. It's a flow, right? Like infinity signs. So everything is being transmitted, right? I don't know what this is under the 12 laws. I don't know what it is, but I feel like there's something there. But I guess you can call it the law of transmission. I don't know. I feel like, look it up if you're curious. I'm not. So anyways, so going back to I just kind of wanted to go deep into this one. Is that what else did I say here? Okay, so going back to the whole flow thing. I've digressed a lot there, and that's normal. That's totally fine. That's part of the flow. It's like that. Okay, going back to the easy thing, right? When something becomes desensitized, we become desensitized to things. It becomes sort of this apathetic. I don't know what to call it. Apathization? I don't know. But anyways, it's just an apathetic thing, right? So in other words, it's just like it's repeating. And that's why people don't like that. I feel like boredom is connected to that, but boredom is not because we're doing the same thing. Boredom is because boredom happens because we are not appreciative of something for its actual essence. Meaning that it's not about the thing, it is the reminder of that thing and why we have it. Does that make sense? So for example, money. When we have a lot of money, we get bored of money, or we don't appreciate it because we feel like, we just have it, it's always just going to come. So there's this sort of it's a twisted appreciation of money. It's because we don't appreciate it. I don't know if that makes sense. Like, so if we have money, okay, let's say we get lots of it, or even if we just constantly get money, it's similar. I feel that the energy is kind of similar to boredom, where we don't appreciate it, because boredom is a result of something that we don't see for what it is. Like, I'm bored of a person, for example. I'm bored of a person because they're not giving me excitement. But what's behind that? That goes back to the resistance thing, right? Like, if we're resisting what we really want. See, when I say what we really want, it's not the egoic want. It's not the delusion like, well, this person is supposed to have fulfilled something in myself. That's not going to happen, because they are only a reflection of what you're looking at. But if you're not resolving the issues within, the resistance at the very least, with this person, like what you want, and what you're going to do is you're going to project that onto the other person, assuming that, and subconsciously, that person is going to fulfill that thing that you rejected in the first place. Rejection, resistance, they're kind of similar. So, going back to the whole analogy of apathy and something that repeats itself. So, the one question here in my head is, how can a stone be smooth if the work isn't put in to make it smooth? Better yet, how can it be smooth if we don't give it time? Okay? So that on its own natural process, it becomes smooth. Simple analogy of a stone. Like this one, I have this one stone, it's a Light 23. This is a raw form, right? And, you can polish it. It takes time though, right? But the fact that when we're focused on the result, the outcome, because we want it to be easy, and we're in a hurry, what happens? Quality is lost, right? So even the idea of making quality work, when we're so focused on the outcome, and then what happens when you try to put quality into something, and you think that time is the only unit of measure, or the actual way to, time itself becomes just like a means to an end. It's like, okay, well, if I put this amount of time into it, 100 hours, I'm going to get that quality. Is it? Think about, let's say if you compare one cook with another cook, right? One cook says, I'm going to work at this dish for 6 hours. He just says, okay, I'm going to count it, 6 hours. It'll take me 6 hours to make this. Versus this other one says, I'm just going to make it as naturally as possible. I'm going to cut the vegetables. I'm going to put care and love into what I'm doing. Appreciate the smell, the movement itself of like, oh, that's cool. It's actually going so, okay, cool. And then, and you scrape the contents, the ingredients onto the pan, and you start mixing it, and you just sit there and you just start to appreciate the sense, through the senses, the smell. Isn't that quality? Eventually that will come quality. The next thing you know, they're like, oh, they're making the same dish, by the way. One does it for 6 hours, the other one does it for, I don't know, 5, 4.5, 4 3/4. It doesn't matter. The point is, the person on this side took the time, meaning they put the energy, it's the intention, where the placing of the attention goes. And how that ties into resistance is the person is resisting that he has to put in that quality because he has to. See the word has to. And then he goes, I'm going to make it in 6 hours. If I don't do it in 6 hours, there's no quality. So he puts a label on it. Right? So either way, you know, if they're using the same tools, they're making the same dish, they're in the same, you know, the same place, the same amount of supposed like maybe hours or whatever, they're given a lot. Maybe they're allotted maybe that's 6 hours, whatever. You see the difference there? It's like, so, at least for me, that's what I'm still learning, right? It's a very similar thing to like what Saturn does. If you look at your chart and what Saturn is, a lot of Saturn things are coming through now. It's like, Saturn, what else is Saturn? Usually when you think of Saturn, we have all these concepts. We see that Saturn is about time, Saturn is about limits, Saturn is a teacher, etc., 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 yada, yada, yada. But the more we put it into experience, at least for me, I realize that Saturn has been teaching me that, you know, time is not time as we see it. Because otherwise it becomes karmic. Let me explain that. I hope I can explain it. So the belief that the belief in no time, right? I have no time is an egoic fear of limits, right? Okay, so the unknown, the end of things, death, etc. It means that we don't respect time, allowing it to flow on its own within us. And I actually wrote here, funny how form or matter can be the source of both giving into resistance and leading us into acceptance. So cook one here, he gave into resistance. The other one just led into acceptance. So the time thing was a concept that one got stuck in, the other one went outside of the time. I hope that makes sense. Okay, so the analogy of the stone I said earlier, or how rivers form, or the effects of the water cycle, or water dripping, or how rivers form. It's like eventually changes become noticeable. See, that's the thing about that energy of life that is life. It doesn't mean that we don't do anything. It's just we have to be open to slowly opening the gate. Okay. As humans, we take things literally quite often, if not always. So example today, I was looking at this video from Galactic Astrology. Here's a resistance came through, actually. I was like, oh my goodness, right? And I couldn't understand what this person was saying. First 29 seconds, literally, first 29 seconds, I couldn't understand her. She was like, she had this really thick accent. I felt the resistance. And the thoughts came, I was like, oh my goodness. I was thinking like, oh my gosh, she's like having this thick accent. Oh my goodness, so that's a thing, that's a system. Because all she knew was to just study English. She just, regurgitated everything, and now she has this accent, and then her understanding of English is what I call I don't call it anything, but like the kind of these hidden subtle things of language is carried through in the words, because that's how energy works, right? It actually carried through the words. The words themselves have energy, just like thought does. With that energy comes the cultural, collective, and also individual conceptualization and the meaning of that word. But it's stronger collectively, so that means culture. So that means it's this sort of thing that carries through. But if she didn't acquire that, this is the thing about acquisition. It goes down to the subconscious, right? For those who have seen acquisition or language acquisition, to research on it, it's working with the subconscious. But as we know now, whether you call it esoteric, spiritual, whatever, it goes deeper than that because it's beyond. So it's much deeper. That's why we have past life. That's why we have this memory is deeper than just, I remember, right? Sorry, I sound like I'm mocking it, but that's, I'm laughing at myself. So, right? So memory is more than, this is why language is more. So the fact that I was irked by this whole thing is because I was resisting the fact that there was blame, right? So I was playing the blame game here, I said. So that they, I said here, I worked on here, that these organizations, language organizations, have created this pandemic of stupidity, making people become dependent solely on information getting, and are still making such things. Because where I work, I actually, I wouldn't say have to, it's not an obligation. I've accepted the fact that, okay, I do this myself, where I teach students and I correct their grammar and all those things. I correct their accent. And I also get used to their accents. So what I'm doing is actually I'm realizing this more and more, that I've chosen it. I made my bed, so I'm going to lie in it. I chose to work in this place. Yes, it's the money thing. But at the same time, seeing it differently downwards, at the very least, kind of like saying, okay, well, that's this system. I'm in that system. What do I do about it? I accept it and go with the flow and not resist, not only the typical resistance being like, okay, well, I don't like this, I want it this way. Because either way, Teal Swan uses the analogy of the boat. That there's half of the people in the front, let's say there's 6 of them, I think she says, like 3 of them are the oarsmen, she said, those oarsmen are paddling in the direction of the river. The other 3 behind them are paddling in opposition of the river. That's the resistance, right? That's resistance. It's not that it's like not necessarily saying like no. It means like oppositions, right? Actually, it makes sense because now astrologically speaking, when you have an opposition, there is resistance there too. Okay, one goes, so you have to balance it and accept the fact that okay, you have to find ways to work with those energies, opposing energies. That's, for example, even though I'm not one for language learning, the method of language learning, these things that for me don't work, I realize it's like, okay, well, I chose to be here, and I accept it. And I continuously try to remind myself, okay, this isn't about this. This isn't about what they're doing. This is about my choices, the decisions I've made, because I want to have this income that is here for now. And in time, eventually I will not work there anymore. Naturally. Right? Things always change. But I'm not going to push it. That's the whole thing. I'm not resisting. At least I have to be aware, or I get to be aware, that it's like, okay, that's what it is. It is what it is. And I've chosen. Again, I made my bed, I'm going to lie in it. Okay? So, I was resisting that whole, why am I reacting? Why is there a trigger that this lady has a thick accent? I don't understand it. So what I did was, okay, I just accept the fact that that's what it is. And I just kept moving on. I said, I didn't watch the video. At the very least, I wasn't prepared. I wasn't resonating with the video yet because there was something. So it's really a work in progress. Right? So on one hand, accents actually can be a good thing. For example, it's cute, or it's an opportunity to listen, or just be completely present with it. Right? Regardless of whether or not, I wrote down here, verbal or oral comprehensibility is achieved. In other words, I understand it. On another hand, it's a collective opportunity, or at least individual opportunity for me, to go back to what's natural. Acquisition. So I had to make a choice. Right? So I still get these triggers. Okay. Things that I want to change, but it may not necessarily be up to me. Like I said earlier, you know, when I said like I have these downloads, I have these ideas, and sometimes I don't get to write it down because I'm doing something else, but they just come through anyways. It's okay, because somehow these will be done by something else. Somebody else will do it. Somebody else will change it, and eventually it's going to happen. I believe that humanity is changing the way it does, at the very least, language. And there's going to be an aspect of language learning that probably is going to remain. And it's going to head towards something more than language acquisition. Because it can't just be about the method anymore. We're moving from this concept of like, this conceptualization of putting things in a box. At the same time, putting things in a box is not about the box. It's more like, let's align them rather than box them. I hope that makes sense. You see what I mean? So instead of constricting it, you know, the unhealthy Saturn, let's call it that, astrologically speaking, let's lead. Right? It actually ties in right now why I'm putting these energies and feeling these things, because we have now Aries coming through. Right? The sun and the moon are going to be Aries, there's going to be an eclipse, you know. Yeah, you'll see it. There's a video I posted before this one. So again, going back to the whole resistance, there was resistance there, we got that. So astrologically speaking, going back to this, any planets or bodies, or even aspects themselves that force us to look within, or for people who are yet to be awakened, or are still awakening, whatever feels like challenges, in case of the hard stuff, we can learn to awaken through acceptance. At least for me, that's what it's been like, right? So time-wise, and it can, of course, for those who awaken even just a bit, go one way or another. One, either you have more resistance, or two, more acceptance. It's going to go either way, right? I would probably say that that's not necessarily needed as a thing, meaning, you know, we can have opposites, but again, this is our collective perception, the human conditioning and human condition, as we've always said it, of polarity, dwelling, all those things. It's part of this reality. Matthias de Stefano added that, and it made total sense to me. I was like, oh. He said that, what was it? He said that the dimensions that we're in, the third dimension, is not actually place. It's actually perception. Realms, on the other hand, is the place. So the point is, we're in the three-dimensional world, so that means our perception of it is going to be that. But as we awaken into the fourth, and then the fifth, and so on, it's changing. Right. So, a few bits of pieces here. So, Saturn, instead of having consequences, because you know, we look at Saturn, the way the words came out, I love it. I love when I get these. Saturn is the teacher, right? But Saturn feels like it's like the disciplinarian. Saturn feels like this Slayer, if you do this. It's tied to karma. So instead of consequences, which is fear, which Saturn rules, it talks about fear, instead, the gifts of Saturn, this is my main point right now, is that it's about results instead. Think of those as results, or as one of my coaches said, say, feedback. Well, feedback from the results. So in other words, faith. This is one of those funny things that people, well, at least some astrologers tend to forget sometimes, which is okay. That's not the point. It's not a bad thing. It's just that we forget sometimes that Saturn is actually just similar to Jupiter because it's about faith. But it's not the faith that is like pure optimism, just go, just expand. No. Saturn is about trusting that what we put in, we get back. That's the karmic thing. But it's not necessarily punishment. See, that's the we think karma is punishment. It's like, oh, I'm going to be this in the afterlife. Oh, the next life I'm going to be a bug. Blah, blah, blah. Right? So it's results. Results meaning that it's the outcome that we accepted. And that's the faith thing. How much time we put into something is not what matters. The energy is, it's the intention. So what ties into this also is that, besides all this stuff, is that, what did I write here? Instead of like the consequential, like sort of like negative karmic belief, or the belief of the karmic process, is if. It's very conditional. If. No. Rewording it is important here. So instead of saying if, we say when. So when I get this done. When is, in other words, it's about trusting the process. It's really trusting the process. We say this a lot in the community. It's like awesome. It's like trust the process. Okay? So gifts of Saturn. I actually found something here. There's something about Sun and Saturn is very similar to our ego, right? Both of them can be healthy or unhealthy. And what the ego wants, I'm just going to read this, okay? What the ego wants, because it wants to shine, or aspects of it, planets essentially, to flow, okay? That's what the ego wants, right? Basically, that's like the sun. Saturn creates limits, enforcing more form to form itself. But in that process itself, it's a reminder, so a teacher, of how there will either be consequences or results. So the teacher is the one that's the neutral party. So it's up to us, in terms of our perception, what we resist. And if you think about Saturn also represents borders, right? That's kind of like resistance, actually that is. But there's different forms of resistance. Either way, it's still resistance. It's that energy opposing something that, in truth, we really do want. The example that she gave in her video, Teal Swan, was the whole actually, I'll use my thing. Like, for example, I used to think that, I'm going to look for a relationship. Right? I'm going to find the right guy. And even right there, okay, I felt the resistance. I feel like I need to hide that. And I felt that. It was like, should I say guy? Oh, all this time he's like, I'm listening to this guy, he's homosexual. Oh, so right there's that resistance because I'm mocking others when in fact it's a resistance to my accepting the truth. That it's like, this is what it is. Right? You cannot change a book once it's made. Once it's made, you cannot change a book. And you can call it whatever you want. The label isn't what matters. And you can change the fact that it's already what it is and change it to something else. And if you do, the flow that comes from that, whether you burn it, rip it apart, put it together, put it back together, make a collage out of it, make paper airplanes out of it, doesn't matter. The point is, whatever we do in something leads to something else. So instead of, see what I mean? So this is where the whole results versus consequence comes in. We think that everything is consequential. Like, if I do this, it's like, it's going to be the negative. It's going to be the negative. It's going to be the negative. So this is the whole thing that I'm talking about. So it's tied to resistance. At least for me, what am I resisting? So I've been kind of questioning that. It's a good question to ask. And for me, this is an additional tool to the shadow work that I do. Right? Again, there's a bit of judgment there. I can sense it right away. Like, do I tell them if it's often or not? It doesn't matter. I do what I do, period. Whatever the results are, that might happen, the aftermath of it is the aftermath. And you just, with no judgment, you see it for what it is. But I feel like with the whole thing about presence and awareness, it goes deeper than that and beyond. Deeper and beyond, actually. Where we see something as it is, not because we see the thing. We see the thing, obviously. I see the book, I see the table, I see this, I see the light, whatever. The point is, it's not about the seeing, it's about the seeing. It's about that it's the acceptance that it's okay. And that's where the beauty comes in. When we at least start with bringing the attention to our bodies, the intention of doing so that we start to at least get a feel, or like we dip our feet into the water and like, okay, not so bad. Let me try that again. Not so bad. Not again. Which ties in here to what I'm talking about with the Saturn thing. Saturn is this whole, right? The negative aspects of Saturn is labeling, putting things in a box, creating these limits, seeing karma as if it's like consequential, disciplining, right? In literal and figurative as well. So this is our inner Saturn. Has a gift behind it that it's like, we don't have to listen to when I say negative, I don't mean like opposite or positive. In reality, in the 3D perspective, yes, it is. But it's more about letting Saturn go, okay, if I make this, see, right here, right there, if, I said if. Why did I say if? The conditioning. And that's okay. We have to choose. So anyways, I'm going to end this there. I did talk about it. I'm just going to go through some reading here. So I wanted to just, I don't know. I want to practice. See what the cards have in store for us. I don't know how the cards are going to come out. Okay, that one came out. Okay, just that one popped up. Another card just popped up. I'm sure it's going to mean something. Always going to mean something. Getting used to this actually. So it's all about that. Okay. I like threes, but I don't need like it. Okay, now I'm going to go with 4, and I'm not going to choose a spring. I'm just going to leave it. Yeah. Okay, so the first card is the Empress. Ooh, the Empress. You can see that. Okay. It's upside down. But I'm going to leave it upside down. King of Cups, also upside down. Two of, what is this? What is it called? 2 of Pentacles. It's upside down. All of these are upside down. Okay. Ace of Swords. So I feel like with the Empress, there's the Venus sign there. So I feel like something to do with gentleness, acceptance, something about paving the way, I suppose, being accepting and recognizing our own vanity, relationships. King of Cups. This one earlier was, I don't actually remember anymore what they said, but what the book said. Something to do with abundance or something like that. This is juggling. It seems like this one's kind of obvious. But it feels like more than just juggling. It feels like indecisiveness. Ace of Swords is probably owning your own power, your own, I was working recently on many of the, a theme coming through with Leo, not only because it's my birth chart, like the whole North Node thing, but it's like owning your own sovereignty, gaining back your own power. Empress. What does Empress say here? Focusing on beauty and art in harmony with the natural world, being extravagant, luxurious living, sensual awareness. So probably this has something to do with Sylvan energy around, where maybe discovering what real luxury is, or something about, it's like enjoying life, but instead of looking at it from the material things, starting from within and appreciating what you have. Resistance comes through when we get so used to the luxury of our lives and not realize, oh, wait a second, what's the inner luxury? What's our inner Venus? It's self-appreciation, self-worth, I'm going to call it self-moneying. It's like self. King of Cups. So something to do, the Empress feels like this is something that we've been going through in the past. Something to do with the past, something to do with change. We're headed towards change. So King of Cups, emotional security, wise person, accepting life's limitations, keeping your head in crisis. This ties in with the whole thing I was talking about, resistance, being more objective and grounded and looking at it from above and being the observer. Acting from controlled emotion rather than instinct, evaluating the situation, creating a balanced atmosphere. Ties in with the Empress, the Venus, balance. Two of Pentacles. Okay, agility, dealing with material things, adapting to a relationship, doing many things simultaneously, dealing with several problems at once, feeling confident in your abilities, having fun, juggling with the options, being willing to go with the flow, and like I said earlier, understanding change. And we're heading towards it. So as the cards progress, this is what's happening. So now it's I like this one, Ace of Swords. I had this once before, remember. What it means, but it doesn't matter. What does it mean, doesn't matter. Ooh, I love to sing, maybe I do, I don't know, I should probably sing. Yeah, sorry. I digress myself. Beginning of new love or awareness, expressing your feelings, being in touch with your emotions. Infatuation with someone or something, establishing new bonds, feelings, developing a desire for a deeper connection. That's a Pluto in Aquarius thing. And Pluto in Aquarius right now, Pluto is in Aquarius right now, but what rules Pluto is Uranus because of Aquarius, and Uranus is in Taurus. Makes sense. Venus is going to be conjuncting Neptune. I think it's already is conjunct Neptune now before April the 8th. So, being in tune with those emotions. I feel like with this one, it's more about where we're headed so that we build a better community. You know, we are moving into this direction of change. Age of Aquarius. This is this is vanity. This is like, right? So I feel like instead of calling it even vanity, calling it like, okay, there's you know, Venus has its thing. Venus tells us it's instead of the shadow of Venus, which is to want things outside of yourself. It's a reflection. It's part of the seventh house thing, the Libra. It's mirroring, it's projection, shadow to this is the thing that's going to give me happiness, right? This is the thing that's going to give me. But what they really mean, this one is like what we're trying to see, what we're trying to get, not move away from, but trying to learn from. Okay. And then this one is King of Cups. So I forgot what that meant. Something to do with certainty, being objective, so basically being observant. So now we're learning to be more aware and conscious. Here, things are happening where we're juggling things, but having fun with the process, and at the same time being open to love, not just human love. I was hoping beyond that. Okay. I think people are starting to really understand that. For those who haven't, you're on your way. So everyone will eventually realize something. Either it goes one way or another, but you know, breathe through it. I hope that was at least informative. That's my take on the whole thing and my experience. Thank you for listening to my story. I will see you guys later.